Milburn Demolition. James Milburn, thanks for coming in on a snowy day, man.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, like we were just talking about, my voice just sounds awful, but maybe it'll sound really good later, I'll bet. But the funny part about doing these podcasts is the stories that you hear from all these guys in the industry. And since we're doing, I love demolition guys because to me, demolition guys are the metaphor of the Hulk and Iron Man in the Avengers. So demolition guys are like Hulk smash, right?
Yeah.
And the carpenters and stuff is kind of like the Iron Man. It's kind of like build it nice and delicately and make it look cool.
Right.
But there's a difference, even with you, that I want to talk about is even on your website you have sections of your website, demo and dismantling. People don't understand there's a difference.
Big difference
between demolition and dismantling.
Mm-hmm.
So demolition is Hulk smash, right?
Yeah. Traditional demolition is Hulk smash as fast as you can go and move on.
And then dismantling is kind of picking bridge decks apart very delicately and making sure that no one dies underneath it.
Exactly right. Yep, that's an very important part of it.
So, well, how did you get started on this whole adventure? I know you from another company.
Yep.
Before that, but even before that, were you always in demo?
Yeah, so I was in the construction management program at Purdue University, and when I was there, the National Demolition Association started making a small presence there, basically as a form of
college.
Yeah, as a form of outreach and attracting new talent to their industry. And so for me, there was one company there hiring interns. So I started as an intern with an industrial demolition contractor out of Buffalo, New York.
From Purdue, they come to the campus and recruit you?
People recruit from all over the country at Purdue for construction management.
Yeah, so, we do too.
Yep. And so I said to myself, number one, demolition sounds badass, so I'm going to try it for a summer. There's no risk there.
Demolition's fun.
And then, I liked it. I was good at it. The company liked me, so they ended up hiring me out of college when I graduated. And I ended up basically working traveling. I was a road toad for
all over the country
and Canada. Yeah, so I was. I think I started in Jacksonville, Florida, and then I was in Kansas City for a while, and then I was in Texas 2 different occasions.
That's pretty fun.
Erie, PA. I mean, I was in some real shitholes you can imagine where industrial demolition's happening.
So right out of college, you're doing that.
Yep. Right out of college, I was, and I was actually like assistant superintendent. So I kind of took the go to college and then go back into the field.
Right, you're supposed to go there to get out of it, right?
Yeah. Well, demo's a little different. If you don't touch the field, it's really hard to grasp especially like the safety aspect of it and the risk part of it. It's really hard to understand it if you're not.
Yeah, safety's a big.
If you're not in it,
that's the thing a lot of guys don't get. Is that you really safety without the safety component? You can't run a business.
Exactly.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah. So I ended up basically doing that for 3 years. That was kind of a rough 3 years just because living in hotels, working 6/12s. One day off, and then I'd be, home one long weekend a month.
Keeps you off the streets.
It did. It kept me, learning faster than I would have normally, just because of the hours I was putting in. And then I got to save up money, bought a condo in Chicago while I was still on the road, kind of like funneling the money back to a safe harbor.
Yeah.
Because I knew I always wanted to come back here. So
yeah, I mean, right out of college, that's really great experience. Not a lot of guys get to do that.
Yeah, and for me it was perfect. I got to travel. I got to meet a bunch of different people, learn a lot. I got to demo some really cool stuff. We were doing like chemical plants, paper mills, steel mills, stuff like that.
Wow.
So real big and complex demo.
It's not like
real Hulk smash demo, as you call it. Yeah,
that's cool. I mean, my experience with demolition is out of necessity.
Yeah,
if something's in your way, get it out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Or I worked for a company that I was a concrete cutter for a while.
Okay.
And I did that all through school. Yeah. I was constantly covered in lime, slime and lime, and we cut a lot of bridge decks,
Oh, cool.
and but it wasn't like the safety component was a little bit. I saw on your website where you guys have got a robotic breaker.
Yeah, we got 2 robots. Yeah.
So you stand as far away as you can from the thing.
You can stand 300 feet away as long as you can see what you're doing.
And you're operating it like it's like
an
you're
Xbox
PlayStation.
controller.
Yeah.
Yep.
So and that's how you're busting. I saw one of them when you're busting up a bridge deck.
Yep.
And I was thinking about that. I'm like, you know what? I was the guy on the saw cutting I remember cutting a bridge deck over to the Kennedy, off of, I forgot what street it was, one of the L streets that crossed the Kennedy. And I'm up there at 3 o'clock in the morning. I got my 60-horse saw out, cutting out, saw cut out, and I'm sitting there on this bridge deck in the middle of the night. There's barely enough light. The guy's got a spotlight shining on me. I'm trying to find the line that he snapped.
Right.
He's yelling at me, "Don't hit the beam."
Yeah,
you hit the beam. He goes, I just remember this guy. If you hit the beam, get in your truck and go see Jimmy, who's my boss. He goes, "Don't even come talk to me." He goes, "I don't even want to see you." He goes, "You hit that beam, you nick it." He goes, "You're out of here." And there's a guy from Lori. So I was like, I'm scared out of my mind.
Yeah, of course.
This was like, I was in college. I was paying my way through school. So, but they had, for the last couple of cuts, I was cantilevered over where there was no, so I'm cutting this thing. They got me hanging from a crane. So I'm on the piece that's going to fall. My saw is on the piece that's going to fall, but I'm being supported with like 4 cables and a crane operator. So the first thought in my head's like, is this guy awake?
Yeah.
Is he going to catch me? Does he know? So, but that was it. And I was just thinking when I was watching the robotic arm, I'm like, you don't even need that now.
Yeah. I mean, even 5 to 10 years ago, there were way more risks being taken every day, right? And we all
AI's taking over, baby, right?
We're starting to figure out like what's the point of that risk. I mean, if it's all just to make money, that's there's risk reward that we battle with as a company every day. But one of those risks that I'm not willing to take is putting somebody in a position to get hurt, at least an obvious position to get hurt. I mean, there's always potential, no matter what we're doing. But
it's like your part of your mission statement is, if you remember it, I was reading it. It was like we're creating safe work environment for our people, but you want basically at the end of the day everybody to go home.
The whole point of going to work,
right? It's like
is
being
to
a cop.
go home and take care of your family.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, what's the point? What are you doing?
I was really, and I read that and I thought about that, and I'm like, that's a lot about, that's a lot how I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to your level because I'm not always dealing with the demolition component.
Right.
But safety's a big problem. I mean, somebody gets hurt, especially a key member of your team, it hurts.
Yep.
It not only just hurts your company, but it hurts that person, it hurts their family, it just goes to, so a lot of the safety component stuff that we talk about, a lot of the toolbox talks, a lot of the stuff that we do on site, a lot of guys kind of take it for granted, but then I always make a point to tell them, hey, listen, you're listening to me for 5 minutes is worth it. Because if you fall off a ladder and break your back, what happens to your kids who are in college? What happens to your wife? What happens to my company, because you're a valuable member of my company, and I have to fill your spot? What happens to the job? There's so many, the dominoes just keep on falling. Just pay attention for 10 minutes.
Yep.
Tie off where you need to tie off. Watch your equipment. Just check it once in a while. Don't do stupid things.
Yeah.
I always tell guys, I would never want any of my guys to do what I did.
Right.
When I was just talking about how I was cutting that bridge deck. How stupid is that?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and most of us have done stuff that we would cringe if we saw our own guys.
Demolition guys are a different breed, though.
Yeah. I mean, it's an inherently riskier trade.
They're risk takers.
Because of that, there's more reward typically.
Yeah.
Interior TI stuff, not as much. I mean, just because it's such a competitive market. But when you get into the mixed bag work, like the interior with 5 slab openings and exterior wall, that's where we get to take advantage of that risk reward opportunity. That's where our planning and our knowledge comes into play, I think. Especially with safety, because the way we look at jobs is if you plan them safely, you're typically more productive also. Which once people start figuring that out, they really, it's like a light bulb. You know?
You're working smart instead of hard all the time.
Yeah. If you plan things the right way, looking at the safety aspect, you're typically positioning your crew to be more productive anyway. So it's like, why wouldn't you?
So hard to find a guy in a field who can drive that message to the guys.
Yeah,
that's hard.
So that's our whole culture as a company. You know, when I started 6 years ago, you know, it was me in an office, and I was hoping to fill the office. And as we grew in the field first, you know, we grew up to maybe a crew of 10 with just me around still, and then I started to bring in some more office people, including Don, which is our director of field operations. It's always been the culture of we're not preaching safety just to preach safety. Like, that's how you have to think. And if you're not going to think that way, you're not going to be on our team anymore, because it's
one way or the other.
Well, it spreads like cancer.
Yeah.
Starting to disregard all the protocols and stuff like that it's cancerous. You know, it's a culture cancer, I call it. So the culture, it's been on our t-shirts since day one. Safety is our culture. There's no safety's number one, safety's this. It's actually it's embedded in what we do.
So what do you guys do? How do you train your guys for that?
So we have one annual safety day, which is actually coming up in a week from Saturday, where we bring everybody that works for us in, including all the office, and we run through general company safety culture, basically 101. And it's just us, you know, rediscussing with the whole company, like why we think the way we think, why we do the things we do, and how they all stem back to keeping all you safe, so you can take the money that you're earning and actually put it to use instead of dealing with insurance claims and back
your
injuries.
Insurance
and
guy too
and,
is probably a big component of helping you guys do that, right?
You know, they come in and they say they're going to do all this training and stuff for us, but then we show them what we're already doing, and they're like, oh,
you guys can train us.
I mean, maybe we'll just come watch. So, which is great if that's what we're doing, and they're good with it. I mean, that's what we'd prefer to do, is we'll beat, you know, we would like to be ahead of the curve, not behind it. So, and then beyond that, I mean, back to the safety culture thing, how do we get the buy-in? Like, that's the key, right? Getting the field guys to buy in when you're not watching. Because we have 25 crews running at any given day. At night, during the day, split shifting. We have 25 foremen. So when they're not doubled up, which right now we're fairly busy. So it's probably about 20 to 25 jobs at any given time. You know, so they have to buy in. We can't supervise all of them all the time. So they start out, Mortensen Construction, I don't know I'm sure you're familiar with them, but they started making us do stretch and bend. And I say making, because at the time I was like, that's a half hour out of the day that I just burned up in money, you know, with a 20-man crew. Yeah. You know, you do the math. I mean, $100 an hour. It's.
What movie was that in? Where they were making cars? They were doing the stretch and bend in Japan.
I don't know. Japan's definitely where it started, though. The whole stretch and bend thing. And Americans are, you know, laughing and making fun of it for 20 years probably before it started catching on here. So we were kind of like, we're okay with it. And then you know, we started to think about it, and we said, you know, we have a safety talk at the beginning of the day, every shift, every crew. We already do this. It's 5-10 minutes. It's an overview of what they're doing that day and any safety specifics that they should know about. And we said, you know, maybe if we did that during stretch and bend every day as a company. So every crew, every day, stretch and bend before they start the shift. It's kind of like a team building thing. Like, they're all stretching and bend. They're razzing each other about whatever the guy did last night. And I mean, it goes along with just building that culture that it's built around that safety talk.
I think that's a huge thing. So I think that's a very effective thing.
2 years ago, we implemented it where every job, every crew, every morning, that's what they do.
You know, when you run, when you exercise, whatever, you know, golf, whatever it is, you practice what you're doing first before you really do it. And it's along those same lines. It gives you the opportunity to think about, okay, I'm going to be, especially if you're working at heights or whatever it is that you kind of do a dry run. A lot of guys, you know, I know a lot of the old timers are just used to showing up and getting to work. And now I think that they see the value in, okay, we're going to do this. Here's what I expect out of you. I expect you to be here when I'm doing this. And subconsciously that works better. So the stretcher bed idea is fantastic.
Yeah.
I think
it builds a transparency also of the crew, right?
guys got to start making them do yoga or something.
Yeah, the whole crew knows what the whole crew is doing now.
Mm-hmm.
So there's never really that, well, I didn't know this guy was doing that beneath me when I started hammering out the slab. Like, there's none of that. There's everybody knows where everybody's supposed to be. And it's just it's a quality 10, 15 minutes that those guys spend together and talk safety and then talk about what they're doing. And it should be happening anyway, whether they're stretching or not. So why not just do both, So
right. Hulk's got to stretch out too.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I remember the only really bad accident I ever witnessed in the trades. There was a couple, but one of them that really just shook me was when I was a concrete cutter. There's a guy, we were cutting a wall saw. We were cutting an opening about that big, about 6 by 8. And the guy had a 36-inch blade in the wall. Mm. And, with the wall saw, you just hook it you clamp it basically to a rail, and you're just cranking it up and down. And the guy, I walked into the room, and I heard him scream. I walked into the room, and I'm like, what's going on in here? There's 2 guys on the ground. One guy was his helper. He passed out because he saw what happened to the guy got his leg cut off. Mm. So, but the foot, I remember the foot, his boot was still, got cut off at the knee. Mm. It was still standing upright right there. So that tells you at the speed.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess what happened was the story I got was that the blade came out of the housing. It was a concrete vault they were in. It bounced off the ceiling, bounced off the back wall, came back behind him, and cut his leg off on the way back. So it was just like a bing, 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 gone. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how do you prevent that? Right? I mean, there's no way there's just, you can't, with the equipment that you're using some big equipment, right? You've got a couple of big excavators. Mm-hmm. You've got some smaller equipment, but I think that the solution is like what you guys use with your remote stuff. If that guy would have been using a remote saw,
they have,
that's how you can prevent that.
Mm-hmm. Or a wire saw.
Or
if it's thick and wall cutting. I mean, there's definitely newer options every day.
Yeah, that's the difference between kind of, the Hulk smash attitude and the Iron Man attitude, which is, some stuff you just can't avoid. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think there's anything that those guys could have done to prevent that, in my mind. Unless they could see microscopic fractures in the hull of the hub that was holding the blade. I don't know.
Right.
But the only solution is just to maybe not put somebody in that situation.
Exactly.
And I think that you were talking about it like, if you don't have to have a guy in a jackhammer, let's not put him on the jackhammer.
Yeah. There's so many reasons why we shouldn't. I mean, it's last resort at this point.
Right.
Due to technology and cost. I mean, let's be real. A piece of equipment's cheaper in the long run than a human being, especially a human being that's bent over
8 hours a day.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many hours I spent on a stupid, a 60 or 90 pound jackhammer.
Yeah.
Dragging that thing around with that stupid hose.
Yeah.
And
the air hammers are even worse too. Yeah.
The air hammers. That's what I used a lot of those things. And if you're breaking up something on the ground, it's fine. But once you start doing awkward stuff, like you're in an awkward position where you're working at heights,
right,
or you're in a confined space.
Exactly.
That's when things go wrong, because you know what? That spade that vibrates out of that thing, sometimes it pops out, and if it hits something and ricochets, it can kill you. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a great idea that you guys have that technology capability to not be putting guys in that position if you don't need to.
Right, right. So we have 2 robots, and then we also have some electric skid steers now, which are becoming more popular, that we can use inside buildings
remotely.
Those aren't remote yet. There's obviously technology being worked on for that, but it goes back to that. Instead of having a guy on his knees jackhammering, a 3-inch mud bed from ceramic tile, like, why not use this little machine with a hammer on it?
Yeah.
And
Very creative.
And save the back, right?
Right.
So
The demolition industry's gotten creative as far as
yeah.
how that goes. It's not like it used to be. I'm talking within the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. Every year now there's something. There's remote control applications for skid steers now. There's these robots are all over the place. They use them a lot in nuclear and steel mill, cleaning pots out and stuff. So there's
Blast furnaces, all that stuff.
yeah, there's tons of uses, and the whole purpose is to keep people out of harm's way.
Yeah.
It was invented literally for that purpose. That's what drove somebody to creating that tool. And it's not a cheap tool. So I could see why there's people that aren't using them. I mean, it's
cheaper than a life. Right?
Well, anything is, in my opinion, but that's the cultural mentality that is still, evolving. Like there's still half old school mentality, and then there's people that are starting to get new, and then there's people that are in the middle.
Well, I mean, if you're bidding a job for the state of Illinois and you really want the job and you're destroying a bunch of, buildings or bridge decks or whatever it is, and you know that you have to be the cheapest guy to win the job, you're generally going to probably not go out and spend the money on a $100,000 excavator or some kind of a remote piece of equipment. It's great if you already have it, but that's kind of why it takes time for this stuff to creep into the industry where it's commonplace, because you just can't win jobs if you're spending, that kind of overhead. Or you just have to go and take a loss on it for a while.
Yeah. I mean, it's everybody looks at the equipment acquisition part of the business a little differently. I mean, my opinion's always been, if we need it, we buy it. If we don't need it, we'll sell it.
Yeah.
And if I lose a couple bucks along the way, at least we tried.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously that's a position you have to be in. You have to be good with your bank and everything else. That there's a lot of things involved in that, obviously. But
yeah, your partners have to agree.
But yeah. Well, yeah.
If you're the only partner, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I'm not the only partner. We just actually promoted Don. I was mentioning him earlier.
Oh, really?
Our director of field operations. He's also principal now. So
good job.
So he's got a piece of the pie. He's earned it.
Piece of liability.
He's earned it. Because he basically runs the whole field, which is.
I've worked with him before. He's pretty good.
A large part of our success. I mean, without I can estimate, budget, sell, plan out complex projects, but if we can't deliver them, what's the point of selling them, right? So, he's picked that side up and done tremendous things with it. So
that's good.
That's also the key to our safety buy-in, because all the guys that work on his side, so all the laborers, foremen, superintendents, they understand what's expected, and there's no flex on that side of things. So,
well, he's a good guy.
He's good at
I'm happy
flex.
to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the other thing too with promotions like that is that I think the understanding is that you're also sharing some of the burden when you're at a partnership level or an owner level, where it's like, you just got promoted, but guess what? You just took on a lot of liability too. Mm-hmm. And so when they look at that, they come to work a little bit differently. So you're looking at things like, okay, I got to make this work.
Yeah, right.
And so that's what you want from the beginning.
Well, that's exactly why he got that promotion. Is because he was already approaching it that way. It was already apparent that this company meant the world to him, and so did the people there, and so that was why it was
don't get that
natural solution. He's a
you want to get promoted.
He's a great American story of going to work as a laborer right out of high school and working his way all the way up.
Oh, really? He was a laborer right out of high school?
Laborer, always been in demolition.
Oh, man.
And since high school. So we got the best of both worlds. We got somebody with 25 years of experience, plus he's not that old yet. So
yeah, how about that? It's like picking up Patrick Kane, right? When he's 17 years old.
Exactly. Yeah, playing professional hockey before you could legally drink a beer, right?
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, I always talk about it with my guys is that, God, how do we train these guys to have that mindset that we just talked about, to take on the ownership role while, and it's not fair to ask a 24, 25-year-old kid coming out of college to have that It's just not.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, you're gonna limit your playing field if that's all you're looking for.
It didn't happen with me. I don't expect it to happen with anybody else. But once in a while, you do run into a guy like that. You're like, wait a minute, I'm going to hang on to this guy. This guy's got the proper mindset, and maybe the feeling is that it's just what you are born with, and it's what drives you to begin with. So it's a natural. Some stuff I think you can train into them, but it's also time of life and what they expect. I'm ready to take this on now. Where some guys are just out of the box thinking that way.
Yeah.
So
it's a combination of things. I think it's what you're born with, what you're raised with, what you learn in that weird time between the age of 18 and 25, let's call it, where you're trying to figure out what the hell you want to do. And then it's also like, do you end up being placed with the right team, like the right people that you?
Some of it's luck.
That you feel like this is going to work, because that's a lot of it. If you don't feel that way, if there's, you get stuck with an ownership group that just doesn't see things the way you do. It's sometimes difficult to change that. I mean, that's not going to work for everybody. So
yeah, I mean, if I was very fortunate to come up through the trade, so some of that stuff you kind of just absorb through osmosis, about your attitude about work and why you're doing it. And then I switched to architecture, where I was in an office environment, so I adapted to that too. I was always kind of very malleable that way mentally, and so I think that serves me well for what we're doing now. But I always bring in guys, and we always talk a certain amount of time about how we're going to get our company to where we want it with the people we have. And a lot of things come into the equation, but at the end of the day, the more and more I think about it, I really think that the right people are going to be the right people from day one. It's just you have to expose it. You have to let them show it to you. And some people you could try as hard as you want. You're like, man, I really want this guy to be successful. And they just don't want to do it, or they just can't do it. It doesn't really matter what the situation is.
The reason's not.
It just is.
Yeah.
And you just got to go.
Yeah.
Go do something that you're happy with. You don't have to be here.
Yeah, we run into that. We've been lucky we've only been around 6 years, so, relatively fresh still. Office warehouse wise, we haven't had a whole lot of transition except for bringing new people in.
Yeah.
We haven't had anybody leave, because part of our hiring criteria is just understanding they're going to fit within our team, whether they're the best trained at demolition or estimating or project management isn't my focus. It's can I work with this person every day, and can we enjoy working together? And then
that's the
rest
thing,
is
right?
learnable.
Man.
And in fact, I like hiring outside of the industry because they don't have any bad habits. I mean, that's my preferred way to acquire people. That's not possible all the time, obviously. If you're growing, you need experienced help. I mean,
you find it hard to get people right now with the economy the way it is?
Nope.
That's good. I hear a lot of people are having trouble with talent. There's just not guys. There's not enough guys out there.
There isn't, but they tend to come work for companies that appreciate them a little more, I think. And so I think that's what we found is news, word of mouth spreads, especially in the field. We have relatively no issue like acquiring labor, foreman, superintendent, just because they kind of are knocking on our door, so to speak. I mean, I'm not trying to toot our horn, but I think there's so many laborers that are so tight knit in Chicago that they all talk, and so they know. Well,
there's not a lot of guys sitting in the hall. I'll tell you that.
No, and we're not a hiring hall anyway. So they, except for the operators are obviously.
Operators, you can't get around it.
No,
there's, that's another thing is that when I think of an operator, when you look at a big piece of equipment on a skyline, like a big crane or something like that, I always sit there and go, God, I wonder who's sitting in that thing.
Yeah, I know.
And I always picture us like some grizzled old guy. He's in his 60s. He's been doing it for 40 years, and he's got his lunchbox next to him.
Lunchbox, newspaper, coffee thermos.
But times are changing. That's not now. There's some kids in there that really know what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean we're definitely in a very transitional period as far as aging workforce.
Did you see that? They're training some of these guys in this equipment in a simulator now.
Well, that's the high reach excavator I was telling you about earlier. I mean, there's simulators for those too.
Oh, really?
It's yeah, you're gonna let somebody hop in that machine and tear down a 10-story building to train on it, or are you gonna at least have them play in a simulator for a little bit to get the idea, you know? So.
Well, I mean, look, that would be the coolest toy ever.
Yeah. Oh,
right? Yeah. These simulators, and I'm wondering if we can get access to one of those things, because that would be if you could simulate stuff like that. Think about any other equipment that you spend how much money on. You're spending a lot of money on equipment.
Yeah.
Especially you, right, as an excavator, as a demolition guy. Why not do a simulator for a jackhammer, how to work that right? Why not do a simulator for how to work a saw? I mean, these kids eat it up. They're all about simulation.
Yeah, VR. Those virtual reality helmets, right?
As far as safety goes, there's got to be some impact on that.
I would think, yeah.
I think that would be,
it's a great idea.
We'll work on it. We'll talk later.
Yeah.
We'll see if we could invent
a jackhammer simulator.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just the safety component of it.
I know. I get what you're saying completely.
Don't
test it in a safe environment. Why test it in a harsh environment? I mean,
yeah. I'm always thinking creatively, but
it.
So now, where do you guys think that? Do you have an idea of, like, when you started Milburn Demolition, how big you wanted to be, what your cap is? You just say we're going to take it?
I mean, I kind of like reverse planned from the way most people do. So I said to myself, what do I need to sell in a year to cover my expenses and to make sure I can bring food home for the family?
Mm-hmm.
I go, anything above that's gravy. So we set that mark. We were fortunate enough to pass that mark in like 4 months. Of doing business. So we grew a lot faster than I thought we were going to.
See, guys, it's easy.
And yeah. I mean, call it luck, call it the economy, call it just right timing, right people, right place, right time. I mean, it could be a combination of all of that. I mean, I'm sure it is.
It's usually the goodness of strangers and friends.
Yeah, it's the customers that you didn't realize were as good of customers as they are.
Yeah.
You think, okay, I can count on these 3 companies to at least throw me some bones, give me a couple jobs that are low-hanging fruit, easy jobs, just to like kind of prime the pump, so to speak. And then it ended up being a totally different group of people that did that. So,
I agree.
It's there's always some that are exactly who you think they're going to be, but there's always a couple, and you're like, wow, that's great.
When I first started, I had a guy go, Jeff, you're my guy. I'm going to give you everything I got.
Yeah.
11 years ago, he hasn't given me one job yet.
Yeah.
It happens, I mean,
it is. It's not always on purpose, but things end up in a weird way, right? So
yeah.
I was telling, we just redid our website, and the branding company that helped us do that was asking me the same kind of question, and I said, well, the problem with us is we don't have a normal yet. We don't have a flatline normal, and I don't know that I ever want one.
It's good to be malleable
as far as revenue growth, type of projects we go after. We're constantly kind of evolving. We're choosing to try stuff, and then we're either choosing to go after it more or to not ever do it again. I mean, so there's both ways. But I mean, typically, we've been fortunate. We've been growing every year quite a bit. Starting to bid out of town work. That might be something
that's
in our
tricky,
future.
Huh? Yeah, we've done a little bit of that. It gets a little tricky knowing the markets.
It's challenging, and the way I look at it is we'll only do it for customers that we know, and only jobs that we fit well with. And so if we do, we do. If we don't,
no, that's good.
Sorry.
No, that's fantastic. So now, what happens with? I was just always wondering the difference between like how you. When you get into debt, did you ever sit in bed one night and go, I can't believe I'm a demolition guy?
I still do.
Right?
Yeah. Like how, if you ask all my friends and my wife and my parents, they're like, oh yeah, he's demolition guy all the way, that Hulk smash thing. Right. But it's one of the few things that like fully engages me. Like I just love looking at jobs. I love figuring stuff out, being creative, and then putting it into use in in the environment that we work in is fun.
I remember talking to one guy about he was a demolition guy on a job, and He's like, you don't understand. I'm constructing it again. Because I'm more of a builder than the builder was the builder. I'm like, no, you're not. You're ripping it apart. He's like, I have to figure out how it went together first,
Right.
before I can take it apart.
Absolutely.
And so when you look at taking down a building or something like that, that's how you have to approach it, I guess.
Absolutely. Especially if you get into like we just did one last year. Actually, we're doing phase 2 this year, which was a post-tension structure. It was actually 4 post-tension buildings all connected together with bridges. The bridges happened to be the beams, and they were post-tensioned, shared throughout the building. So we had to find a way to basically shore them, separate them, retension them prior to demolition. So we didn't collapse the building that was staying.
Oh.
So there was 2 staying, 2 going.
Oh.
It was like 1 go, 1 stay, 1 go, 1 stay.
So you couldn't just...
You can't just go after it. I mean, it's like everybody just thinks just bring the excavator and rip it down, and it's just not all that.
You know, my approach
Some
would
of them
be,
are that simple. I mean,
I'd think about imploding it. That would
Yeah.
be, but I don't know anything about demolition.
Implosions are great if it, everything's got to align. The village has got to be on board. The owner has to be on board. There has to be nothing within a couple hundred feet typically.
That'd be pretty remote then.
So there's a time and a place for it for sure.
And you guys get into that kind of work?
Yeah, we've actually haven't done one yet, but we've bid quite a few jobs using them. I've been on implosions at my previous company where they implode boiler towers and industrial type of stuff just to get them. I mean, the whole purpose of implosion is to get it closer to the ground so you can work with it. High reaches are available now up to 175 feet, so you can have an excavator with a processor on it. They're not that effective that high, as you can imagine.
Oh boy.
So if you got a big structure that's that tall, you're still looking at, can I just drop the whole thing? And then clean it up on the ground.
Yeah, the only one I ever worked on was public housing.
Yep, the one that they put the big flag on and everything. Daly used to like to make a scene out of those.
I was working for the Habitat Company at the time, and we were the receiver for the CHA. And we did a bunch of public housing demolition jobs. And my role, I was just kind of a junior architect at the time, so they barely would let me on site. But I was like, I want to see how they're going to do this. So the guy, he let me go out there and look at it, and I was talking to the guys. And there's a science to it. It's not it's not like just strap a bunch of C4 to a column and then walk away.
No, when I send out jobs there's a couple implosion companies that are basically, everybody thinks demolition, you blow shit up. Well, that's not. It's less than 1% of all demolition involves explosives. And there's basically 2 or 3 really, really reputable, solid implosion firms that basically travel the country as subcontractors to demolition companies.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's typically how it works. We basically reach out to 2 of them whenever we have a bid that we're working on that involves it, and the questions they ask would amaze you. I mean, as far as like how detailed we have to get with, and that's just even to bid the job. That's not even to implement the work. That's just, we got to have a plan that's going to work and that's not going to be a safety hazard. And
well, because a lot of those just sometimes they don't work right.
Yeah,
Right. I mean, it sucks to have the whole thing set up and then only half the building came down.
Right.
Now you got a problem.
That's a big problem. Yeah, that's a real dangerous problem.
Because now it's twice as dangerous as it ever was. And
oh yeah.
How are you going to get in there?
Yeah. So most of these companies figure in, factor of safety where they, if they come up with, they only have to blow, the columns on 2 floors, they'll add another floor.
Mm-hmm.
So you're blowing 3 floors at once so that there's no way it doesn't just start to sandwich down on itself. And they need as-builts of all the, the column construction, how much rebar's in them. I mean, the things they ask and require are pretty extensive.
Yeah, and I would assume that you could do some exploratory demolition yourself just to find that out too if you wanted to. Right?
Yep, absolutely. The problem is if you're bidding using it, you got to know ahead of time, right? Because otherwise you're guessing, which we do a lot of educated guessing in demolition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's basically what we do when we estimate. Even with as-builts, they're never always right.
People don't understand that. When you're giving somebody an estimate, it is an estimate.
Absolutely.
And sometimes, especially in public jobs, the guy who gets the job is the guy who just
purposely look at the plan and you have tunnel vision, and then you try and change order your way out of it. That's what low public bid equates to.
Yeah. The guy who made the biggest mistake usually gets the job.
Yep.
It was pretty funny. Now with interiors, you guys still do quite a bit of. Interiors.
I mean, interiors, especially in Chicago. I mean, it's a baseline. I mean, that's always there. There's plenty of buildings that are getting worked on.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, I was on a demo job, and I forgot the name of the guy who was doing the demo, but they had this guy out there. They had to be 6'8", and he had to be a football player, just built like a bodybuilder. They would just cut a section of the wall,
and he would carry it out,
take it, and bring it right to the elevator, set it in, go get the next one. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
That's some production there, baby.
Absolutely.
But interior demolition is all about the elevator, your access to it, and your path.
Yep. So it's volume of material and how you're getting it down to the dumpster. I mean, that's the key to it. I mean, obviously there's production with demo as far as like the removal time, but if you screw up the haul out time, the time it takes to get it from point A to the dumpster, that's the big one that can get
and the lead component, now the lead component, that affects you guys a little bit, doesn't it? Or you guys just worked it out with the...
Luckily in Chicago, there's these waste haulers that are really, really good at recycling. I mean, right. they take a mixed load and they send it to their transfer station and they sort it all out into their components, and then they feed us a report at the end of the month saying how much we recycled. And typically we're 75% or better without even trying.
Yeah.
So the only thing really separates metal purposely, because that gets taken to a scrap guy.
And then asbestos, if you run into anything like that.
Yeah, we do a lot. We actually contract quite a bit of asbestos. We don't self-perform that, but we do, on building retrofits where it's basically a combination strip out with abatement and stuff. We contract quite a bit of it because it's got to coincide. The scopes have to align. There's a lot of gaps that can be had that can cause trouble for either me or the abatement guy, so I'd rather just hold the whole thing.
Yeah,
or have them hold us, depending on whose is bigger.
You ever run into this stuff called pyro bar?
Yeah, all the time.
So this is 200 South Michigan had a bunch of it at one point.
The white, yeah,
white block.
We've taken some of it out from there actually.
And that stuff, you just didn't see it coming. You're just like, well, no one told us it was in here. Yeah. But the other forms of asbestos that you don't know are there is usually pipe wrap.
Pipe wrap and floor tile.
You can't see that. Floor tile, now everybody's like, if it's 9x9, it's probably hot.
Yeah, or black mastic. Those are the two key indicators.
Well, other than that, I mean, at some point, we got to run out of this stuff. How much stuff do we install? Right? I can't.
That's a good question.
We're still looking at jobs where, like, how are we still running into asbestos in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, I've been asking that question for a while now, and I think the answer is forever. People... It's a money thing now versus a money thing later. And so you get owners that they're like, leave it, go over it, we don't care. Mm-hmm. And then 10 years when the lease expires,
now you're stripping it out.
And you're dealing with it. And guess what? It's a new owner's rep and they forgot it's even there. Yeah. So it's just like one of those, it's never going to fully go away, at least not in our lifetime.
Yeah.
It's already getting less. I mean,
but it's less common.
Yeah. I mean, because the new buildings obviously don't have it, but even buildings that were built in 89, 90 could have it because there was leftover materials. Canada still produces it. I mean, it's a great product for what its intention is.
It works well, just not for people.
It's just not for people. Yeah, exactly.
do not eat it.
Yeah.
But so now you guys have now. How many guys got in the office now?
So we have 5. I would say 5 estimator PM types.
Yeah.
A couple superintendents, sales guy. Operations manager, and then warehouse, and then admin assistants. So we probably got about 10 to 15 in the office warehouse.
You guys are like where? Like in Bellwood?
We're in Bellwood, yeah, right off of 290 and 25th.
290 and 290.
290 and 294.
Right, that's where
right
it turns.
Before that. Yeah.
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 And that's a pretty good place for an operation like that.
Yeah, it's great for us. We got a nice big warehouse with a big lot, and off rush hour we're 25 minutes from downtown.
Yeah.
In rush hour, it's 45, but I mean, where can you be that it's not really,
Nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. So we like it, and we can get it, and we can scoot to the burbs easily from there too, which is
Yeah.
because we do a fair amount outside of the city.
So is there anything else that you guys are looking at getting into that you're gonna start kind of get into stuff that you weren't into before? Any kind of demolition work or?
You know, we're the total building removal. We've been slowly adding that in. We started as strictly interior, and that was for a few reasons. It's money for equipment wasn't there, and my personal experience level with estimating was better in that court.
So when you're thinking about demolition estimating, it's really all about how long does it take this guy to knock that thing down and get it out,
and
right?
how long to get it out. Like I was saying, that getting it out is at least half the time. So at least
that's what a lot of guys don't get,
and that's why I hate when people ask me for square foot numbers.
Yeah,
I know it's a necessary evil, but I'll say send me the plans. I'll do a budget. I'd rather do a takeoff and say this is why this is $5 a foot instead of $350 like you want it to be.
Yeah.
Because I know everyone measures it on that, but it's if I tell you that's what it is, that's an unrealistic way to look at things.
It's just like, somebody's shocked by the fact that it's thousands of dollars to build, 6 feet of wall.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I can go to Home Depot, and they're always thinking of what is the material cost? That's only a tiny part.
That's
of
the
the
smallest
equation.
part. Yeah.
It's the stuff that has to happen before that and after that costs you the money.
Yep. Yeah,
So.
and waiting at their loading dock for an hour to unload, and all that time that comes into that that nobody thinks about.
I mean, they think demolition should be the lowest overhead operation to start because all you need is a hammer and an arm, right? Technically, but there's so much more to it now.
Right.
We're just talking about the robotic stuff.
Yeah.
And all that.
On the safety component, I mean, it's expensive to provide the top-notch safety equipment, the top-notch tools that create a safe working environment, because that's the other component, is not letting your tools age to the point of being dangerous, especially with scaffolding and ladders and everything else that we use. I mean, so that's where our overhead lies. I mean, certainly. We're not heavy on paperwork. I mean, that's actually why I love demolition. I always laugh when I get the warranty request. I sign them because I'm like, oh, no problem.
It's not there now.
I will warranty that wall is not going to jump back in the building.
It's not going to grow a new one.
No problem. Exactly. So lead reporting, standard billing, waiver, stuff like that. That's basically the extent of our paperwork.
Yeah, no, that's the advantage of being in that trade.
Yep.
And it's funny because when I was in architecture school, we did this whole thing, and towards the end. With deconstruction and the idea of looking at a building in its barest, most essential element. It's like, I have a building here that the Greeks and Romans built and all this fenestration and decoration on it. Let's look at what it really takes just to have a building. And what does that mean, and all this theory and all this stuff. And I kind of got into it, and then after a point, you're like, okay, so now you got a box. It's kind of ugly. Postmodernist, great, you did great. It's
right.
But the deconstruction process that the thing that I kind of learned from it was it reminded me of what my conversation was with the demo guy. Was like, look, when I take it apart, I have to figure out first how it went back, how it got constructed, and in architecture, a lot of that is the same process. Is okay, in looking at the use of the building and how it is assembled. Some of these buildings may be recycled and used and repurposed. So can I construct a building that is malleable so that I can do both things with the same structure?
Right.
And then the demolition guy comes and knocks it all down anyway.
Of course.
So,
well, money talks at the end of the day. It's deconstruction's great when the components are right, and I mean, Chicago common brick is a commodity. So whenever a building gets torn down in Fulton Market, which there's been a lot of them going away, that brick always goes to a new home. At least the salvageable parts of the brick, because we still demo with heavy equipment, and not all the bricks get saved. But
I always thought the good, really some of the best brick is from the repurposed stuff.
Oh yeah,
like the newer stuff, it's
It's just like wood, same thing.
Yeah, the Chicago Common is just still great brick.
Yep, it looks great. And it's sturdy, and I mean, and people love it. I mean, it's got history.
It's a commodity.
Yeah.
So how did you ever consider the name when you were just starting out? You're like, oh, it's just gonna be Milburn.
I was.
There's so many cool options with demolition.
I was just not in a creative moment. And the way I looked at it was, do I want it to be my name because it's my name? Like it's not like a puff in my chest purpose. It's just that it was the easiest way for people to understand quickly that it was me behind it. And so potentially I could gain some quicker business that way.
Yeah. Well, the idea that it's family run also is appealing to a lot of guys.
Yeah. And I'm not one for coming up with I
would have came up with like Jenga.
Like blow it up, blow it up Inc. or whatever. There's some cool stuff that you can come up with, but there was that was just a default, to be honest with you.
Because you know what, demolition is a lot like Jenga, the game.
It is.
What can I pull out here without it falling down?
Yeah.
And that kind of ties back to what we're talking about with when you're doing buildings. Now, knocking down interior partitions is different from taking a 3 or 10 story building and deconstructing it.
Mm-hmm. That's
Jenga. That's okay. We have to figure out that, number one, no one gets hurt. Number two, what's the most efficient way to do this?
Right.
So since it doesn't sound like you guys are going to be stuck with one thing that you do, you guys look like you're pretty all over the place, pretty malleable with your approach.
We break our work into three we call three demo types. I mean we got the selective interior work, and then we got specialty work, and then we have total structure removal. So the specialty work is the stuff that we really love. Just because it's always different, never the same. That's removing escalators, elevators, water tanks from the roofs of buildings, fire escapes, structural slab openings for new stairs that we do those all the time, stuff like that.
The fire escape stuff, I saw something on your website about this.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, that's a pretty good shot.
That was a cool job, yeah. Those kind of things that people don't always know who to go to, right? Like, you're an owner of a building and you're like, man, who do I even call to remove a fire escape? Is it a demo guy? Is it a fire escape guy? Is it a GC and they can figure it out? I mean, what is it, right? So things like that are cool. We like to do those. And so I would say no, there's nothing that we're not interested in as long as it's possible to do it safely and it's possible to make money on it. And we're capable of doing it in our comfort zone.
I always wondered, as an architecture student, looking at the Chicago skyline and seeing the Sears Tower and seeing, all these huge skyscrapers. What happens when they're
going to take those down?
Yeah.
Top-down method.
Yeah, that's the only way you can do it.
Yeah, so you basically come up with a hydraulic scaffold system and you wrap the building and you take it down a floor at a time.
And it just shrinks one floor at a time.
Yep.
And,
they've done them a lot overseas. Europe and Asia, as far as demolition goes, are usually about 5 to 10 years ahead of us.
Really?
They have a culture of investing in that what if we could do it this way mentality. Not let's just keep doing it this way because we're already good at it and we can keep doing it that way. So they're a little, just their outlook's a little different, I think, and what they invest their money and what they risk their money on. So not to say
space is also sometimes at a really premium in some of these markets where maybe it's worth it.
Absolutely.
To take it apart.
Well, and their buildings are older. I mean, so their taller buildings are older. They're more established, and so they've, the taller ones have to come down sometimes.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, New York's done a few real big ones. It's coming.
I don't think Chicago's taken down a skyscraper yet.
No, it's coming though. I mean, it's got to be. There's some pretty tall brick facade ones that I would imagine at some point.
The tallest one is the Monadnock building. It was the original skyscraper.
Right.
It's the tallest skyscraper made out of brick. It's on Dearborn.
Okay. Yeah.
But I don't think they'll ever tear that down.
Well, I was going to say Chicago's really good at repurposing these buildings. What do they call it? Adaptive reuse has been a big.
Yeah.
When I hear that on a bid invite, I'm like, oh yeah.
Here we go, baby. All right. Well, listen, thanks for coming in, man. It was really interesting. I enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
You
I
guys
appreciate
do a good job.
Thank you.
But I think some of the really cool stuff that you guys are doing with the robotics and your approach to demolition, I think it's all good. I think it's just going to get better. So check out the website. What's the name of your website?
Milburn.com.
Milburn.com. Simple.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see all the stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, James. I appreciate it.